You were standing over a dead animal. Maybe your group killed it 2 days ago. Maybe you found it already dead and aren't entirely sure how long it's been lying there. There's no expiration date stamped into the flesh, no little sniff test app on your phone, no fridge you forgot to check. Just meat, sitting in the open air, slowly and invisibly turning into something that could either feed your entire group for a week or kill every single person who eats it within 48 hours. And you have to decide, right now, with nothing but your own senses, whether it's still good. This isn't a hypothetical. This was Tuesday. For roughly 300,000 years, every single human being who ever lived had to make this exact call over and over again, with their own life and the lives of everyone they loved riding on the answer. Get it right and you eat. Get it wrong, and, depending on the pathogen involved, you might be dead within a day. Or you might survive the meal itself, only to die slowly over the following week as the bacteria finished what the bad decisions started. So how did they actually do it? How did people with no microscopes, no concept of bacteria, no germ theory whatsoever, manage to look at a piece of meat and correctly guess, often enough to keep an entire species alive, whether it was food or poison? The answer involves a sense of smell that's doing more chemistry than you'd ever give it credit for, a genuinely strange psychological quirk that makes disgust one of the most powerful emotions a human being can feel, a network of elders and specialists who turned hard-won mistakes into rules simple enough to hand to a child, and one particular discovery, that meat left to rot in a very specific and controlled way could become not just safe, but actually more nutritious than the day it died. Let's start with the tool that was doing the heaviest lifting before any conscious decision was even made, your nose. Long before your brain has finished forming the thought, should I eat this? Your olfactory system has already run a chemical analysis and handed your brain a verdict in the form of a feeling. That feeling is usually disgust, and disgust, it turns out, might be the single most underrated survival mechanism the human body has. Spoiling meat releases a very specific cocktail of volatile organic compounds as bacteria break down proteins and fats. Compounds with names like putrescine and cadaverine, which, yes, are named exactly the way you'd expect, are produced as amino acids decompose. These molecules are detectable by the human nose at concentrations so low they're almost unbelievable, sometimes just a few parts per billion. Your nose did not evolve to appreciate fine wine. It evolved, in no small part, to keep you from poisoning yourself. Researchers studying olfactory evolution have found that humans, despite having a famously weaker sense of smell than dogs in most categories, are actually exceptionally sensitive to the specific compounds associated with decay and spoilage. This isn't a coincidence. It's the product of the exact same brutal evolutionary filter that shaped bitter taste perception. The individuals whose noses correctly flagged dangerous bacterial growth as horrifying tended to survive long enough to pass that sensitivity on. The individuals whose noses shrugged it off did not get that chance nearly as often. And the feeling itself, disgust, is doing something far more sophisticated than simply registering an unpleasant smell. Psychologists studying the emotion of disgust, most notably Paul Rosen, have argued that disgust evolved specifically as a behavioral immune system. It's not just information, it's a command. A bad smell tells your brain something is wrong. Disgust tells your entire body to recoil, to stop chewing, to spit, to physically distance yourself from the source immediately, without requiring a single second of conscious deliberation. That immediacy matters enormously. A toddler doesn't need to understand bacteria to gag at the smell of rotten meat. The reaction is automatic, visceral, and almost impossible to override through willpower alone, which is precisely the point. Evolution did not want this decision left up to careful reasoning that might be clouded by hunger, exhaustion, or simple bad judgment. It wanted a reflex. This is worth sitting with for a second, because it explains something that feels almost too convenient to be an accident. Disgust is one of the only human emotions with a near-universal facial expression recognized across every culture ever studied. Nose wrinkled, upper lip raised, eyes slightly narrowed. Charles Darwin himself documented this expression as consistent across radically different populations he encountered, and modern cross-cultural psychology has confirmed it again and again. a face built specifically to physically protect the nose and mouth from further exposure to whatever triggered the reaction in the first place. Your face is not just expressing an emotion when you smell rotten meat, it is actively trying to seal off the entry points for whatever poisoned that smell in the first place. But smell alone wasn't a perfect system, and it's worth being honest about exactly where it falls short, because the gaps in this system are just as important as the parts that worked. Some of the most dangerous bacteria responsible for food poisoning, Clostridium botulinum being the most catastrophic example, can grow in meat without producing the dramatic, obvious stench most people associate with spoilage. Botulism toxin, one of the most lethal substances known to science, can be present in meat that smells perfectly normal, sometimes even pleasant. This is precisely why botulism has remained a genuine danger throughout human history and right up until the relatively recent advent of refrigeration, food safety regulation, and modern medicine capable of treating severe bacterial infections. The system of smell, taboo, and processed preservation that ancient humans developed was remarkably effective given the complete absence of any scientific understanding of the underlying chemistry and microbiology, but it was never airtight. Studies of skeletal remains and historical records consistently show evidence of populations dealing with significant rates of gastrointestinal illness, and it's reasonable to assume a meaningful percentage of that burden traced directly back to spoiled or improperly picked meat.